Continuing the series on messiology, the study of messiness, and the church and our own lives and the experiences that we have and what we go through. I want to read, we are looking at the woman at the well. Jesus asked, let me just read it for just a moment here. John chapter 4, verses 13 and on. Jesus answered, "Anyone who drinks this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." She said, "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. In fact, the fact is you have 5 husbands. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." One of the things I want us to understand and point out in this reference about the woman at the well in Jesus, she's a Samaritan woman. She's considered an outcast. That's an actual picture of Jacob's well, and off in the distance is that mountain in which Jesus refers to and which she refers to. But one of the things I want us to understand is this: when Jesus said you have 5 husbands, you've had 5 husbands and the one you have is not, she walked away from that completely surprised. She just said, "Wow, you are a prophet." Why did that touch her so much? In this culture, if you had 5 husbands, it usually meant this, and I'm going to cut to the quick here because there's a lot of different opinions and a lot of different commentary on this, but I think the heaviest weight is in this one area. Men in this culture were the ones that had the authority to divorce. Women did not. So she has been rejected. And you can find any reason you wanted to not be content or happy with your wife. And you can give them a certificate of divorce. So this woman most likely has been rejected most of her life. She is in deep pain and a lot of hurt. And she comes to this well alone. And Jesus revealed to her her hurt, her pain, her messiness, and touched her in a very special way in which she knew Jesus Christ was the prophet. And what I want to do this morning is I want you to hear this amazing story, and we're going to touch on it just a little bit. Allie, come on up. Let's welcome Allie again. If you could, we have some question and answers that you guys have submitted to me during the week. But the first question I'm going to ask you is what a person asked me was, "How tall are you?" That was one of the questions.
I'm 5'11".
5'11". Briefly tell us, if you can, so that those of you who didn't hear you last week, just a quick retelling of your story of redemption.
Brief. I was a outstanding athlete when I was younger. I fell into the grips of addiction. I had a 10-year battle with that, which ultimately ended up leading me to being victimized by human sex trafficking, kidnapping, and gang affiliations, pretty much.
Now, you're good. What I wanted and what we wanted, especially when we had met earlier, and that is that she wanted to share how God has redeemed her in the area of what brought you to Corbin and what has taken place since you've been at Corbin in your scholarships and everything.
Yes. So, just piggybacking off of last week, I think we focused really on the mess, and that was the intention of that testimony. But God has done so much more for me since, I've come to Him. And He ultimately, redeemed my gifts that He gave me, and I pursued softball. I don't know if did I touch on that last? Oh. So, when I got clean off drugs, I wanted to pursue stuff I walked away from because of my addiction. And so I got clean off of methamphetamine, and I was injecting heroin at the age of 23. At the end of, I quit when I was 23. I came to Christ at the beginning, actually a day after my birthday. I came to Christ and I was saved at 24. And a week later, I decided to go. Well, in that process, I was getting clean, and there was a sober living environment I was living in California. And the head of the guy that ran that, knew the softball coach for our local junior college. And I was just briefly telling him about who I was before I got into my disease. And he said, well, let's get you, let's have a conversation with the coach and see what we can do for you. And I thought he was crazy. But I decided to go with that because that was the door at the time that I was learning God was opening for me. And so I did it scared. And I did it anyways. And I was sitting there in front of this coach, probably still kind of like messed up from drugs physically, thinking in my head, wow, this is crazy. But I did it, and I threw overhand, I threw underhand, and he said, okay, let's get you on the team. And so he was going to give me a semester to kind of learn how to get back into being a full-time student. Like, they kind of wanted to see if I could handle the load of that. I ended up getting asked to play before that semester began, and I started a week after I was saved. Like that next week. And so I played there for 2 years. I started to outcompete all of the girls. At that time I was 24, 2 months clean off drugs, and I was outcompeting all of these 18 to 22-year-olds on my team. I began pitching that next semester because during fall seasons in college, you play higher divisions just to play, and I started out-competing the Division I teams I was pitching against. And so in a year's time, I got a lot of attention. One, because I was a left-handed drop ball pitcher, which is pretty foreign. It's old school, right? I was from a younger generation. And so that was a hot commodity. That was a hot commodity to the universities that look and seek for transfers. So I ended up transferring to Corbin softball, or Corbin University, on a 3-year full ride scholarship.
How'd that go?
Whew. I haven't actually talked about it since it's happened. So I had 2 years left to play when I came. I was originally supposed to redshirt a year because we had 9 pitchers on our softball team. I outcompeted and became the second starter of Corbin in my first semester I was attending. They lifted my redshirt year, and I began an official season. Our first year was kind of rocky. The head coach that signed me, we just didn't get very far in our season. We kind of just went to conference tournament and dropped the ball. And then my senior year, we had a new head coach come on. She's amazing. She disciplined us. She trained us. She made us, she just did an amazing work in a miracle's time, right? And we ended up taking first in our conference. We won the first round of opening nationals, which is like, there's like, you have to get to the lower part of nationals to get to the top 10 teams in the nation to go to the World Series. And we blew through all those teams, and then we went to Florida for the World Series and competed until we won second place in the nation.
Woo! That's great. Now we're getting to some of the tough questions, and that is, you shared about last week about marijuana and alcohol. Did you see that as maybe a gateway drug into some of the other drugs in your life, and others? Did that lead into other things, or was that? How do you view that?
Well, being a psychology major, I study this stuff. So, ultimately, once you expose your mind to a mind or mood-altering substance, it becomes rewired to desire that substance, similar substances, whatever the case. So, yes, ultimately, weed and alcohol do retrain your brain to need a substance to function. And those substances can lead to other substances, or you can just maintain that one substance, But I ultimately was exposed to different kinds. My curiosity and my desire to see if I could control this substance is what led me to use more and different drugs.
Do you look at some of the environment you were in that affected that, or that exposed you to that, or was it just okay? It was just entertainment. It was just for the fun of it, or did it cause you to go deeper into it, or was it innocent at first?
No, definitely not innocent. I have a father who uses marijuana pretty regularly. And he drank a lot when I was younger. Now he pretty much just stays with that, using weed medically and for other reasons. But I was just exposed to seeing people do that around me, and then my sister jumped into it, and we took it to a whole nother level than how my dad does, But yes, ultimately my environment definitely taught me how to do that, and I just walked that path because it was something that I knew, and I took it on then in my own way, and I didn't stay the way my family can use. They use successfully, if you want to call it that. I was just completely defeated by addiction.
Someone asked, we're going to call it the bad guys in your life. How did they keep control over you?
Fear, pretty much. I'm assuming this question is pertaining to when I was drug-induced, because I kind of shared about how I was released from the control of the people that kidnapped me consciously. So, fear, they controlled my emotions. They controlled who I got drugs from. They would just show up if they heard that I was somewhere, in just their presence, and kind of having that knowledge that you're alone and we are a unit. We're bigger than you. Don't try to mess with us. It was just something that they used, a fear tactic, basically, to isolate me, keep me alone. And then I don't say this a lot, but I was actually drugged with bath salts to try to make me go crazy. They wanted to make me go any other direction than have a conscious understanding of what had happened and make sense if I ever tried to speak up for myself. So God also redeemed me from that, because he pulled me back. That was something that took me very deep into a psychosis state. And piggybacking off my trauma, that was just they were going to just let me go and run wild and lose myself, basically.
What are some of the effects of what you went through in life? How does your past affect your present? Or are you just completely free from that and there isn't any repercussions? Is it like a total deliverance, or is there still some of your past that does affect you today?
Yes, it does, in a very, very, very smaller sense than how it did, a year ago or a year before that. I'm now 3 years into what I call my trauma healing process, prayer and meditation process. I'm 3 years into a program that recovers me from addiction. So when I first started that process, it hit me every chance it could. Worship songs, feeling like if there was anything that talked about being dirty or just an outcast, like, how, I don't know, the worship music for me was a big thing. I would be attacked by that because I could identify so deeply with what that meant to feel dirty or to be a sinner. And it kept me away from God for a long time. And then, a big way that I'm attacked is you don't know what happened to you when you were unconscious, so your testimony is not real. And that will get me at school. That will get me when I'm sharing with just a friend. It'll kind of try to come over me to take away the victory that God has claimed over my life. And so when I came to Corbin, I got right into my psychology classes. I've taken everything from trauma therapy to general psychology, just anything that kind of touches on the brain or human, behaviors and memories, right? Memories is a big one for me because my memories, I don't have a conscious understanding of everything that has happened. So anytime my psychology classes touch on that, I go straight to my psych advisor and I process the trauma that comes up. So it's a physical thing. Anywhere from feeling it deep in my gut to tension in my back. Like, I just kind of have to sit in it for a minute, let it come out, because I will push it. I will ignore it. And so that's just kind of part of what I do to let my body release the experiences that didn't get lodged into any type of memory compartment.
How do you handle circumstances or when a memory comes back to you, maybe that you didn't have before, and you just realize it then? Or do you question that, whether it's real? Or how do you process all that today in retrospect of what you've been through?
I go straight to God. I seek his face. I seek his presence. I don't sit in that by myself. I used to defend my testimony in my own mind. I'd try to collect all this evidence that, yes, this is what really happened to me, and it would send me on this rabbit trail mentally that would pull me back to a place where I felt like I was broken again. And so I go straight to God, and I work through that with his presence, with him next to me, with him through worship music, through scripture. And if I don't get any freedom or relief in that sense, I go to mature believers. I have people pray over me. I do what we do for each other, if I can't do it with just me and God.
How do you work through if you feel like some group of people, whether it be men, or whether it be a gang, or whether it be even an ethnic relation, how do you filter through that and respond now to it, or to people or circumstances?
So when you ask me if I've been delivered from certain things, I can relate this to being completely delivered. There was an experience I had when I first shared my testimony with my home church in California, where I was originally introduced to Christ. And a man walked up to me after the service, an old man, beard, probably late 60s. And he's scared and timid and fearful. And I was like, okay, just listen. I don't know what this is about. But I just said, hi, what can I do for you? And he takes my hands and he's quivering and he's shaking and he goes, I need to tell you something. And I was like, okay. He's like, I was a gang member. I was one of the men that did that to women. And I've never heard it from the victim side. I've never heard what it was like for a person that I inflicted that kind of pain on to go through. And I just need to ask for your forgiveness. And I was like, whoa, right? I'm getting the chills right now talking about it. I took his hands and I was like, we need men like you. I need you to keep seeking Christ, because there's going to be men that come behind you that think they have no hope, that think they don't belong here, that don't have any type of belief that they can, they're worthy of God's love or change, even changing from that type of person, And I was like, you are going to represent and be an example to men that need to be restored and need to know Christ loves them even no matter what they've done. And to have that kind of conversation, I've been completely free from. Like, I live a program of recovery, and I'm in these rooms where people are coming in from prison or they're coming in from gangs, and I see them, and I can relate them to the people who harmed me if I wanted to when I hear them talk about it, but I just don't. My mind doesn't go there anymore, and I'm super grateful for that, because that would be something that would keep me enclosed. But through the process of doing all the other things to release trauma, that's just something I don't struggle with. One thing I do struggle with is seeing predator-like behavior. So emotional manipulation, or a man, fixed on this woman, that's something that kind of triggers me. So I have to be careful with that, and I really have to go to God and surrender that person and believe they can change too.
Good. Those bad guys, have any of them been caught? Have any of them been brought to justice at all that you know of? That was a question that came in.
Not on my part. I have gone to God over and over and over about this situation, and I never brought justice personally for me. I did end up finding out that some of these men had gone to prison for other reasons. Some are clean and try to add me on Facebook, which is really creepy. They, whatever is necessary, I see God either giving them an opportunity to change, or they are being restored from ultimately what our addiction tells us to do to get what we need, right? Like, everything is a means to an end. Everything has value on it. However you can get ahead, they'll use that, right? People, robbery, like all of that stuff. So I'm not a human in their eyes, but that's okay, because I understand where their mind goes. And so to see God kind of redeem them or put them somewhere where they can't harm people is definitely something I've experienced in this process. But no, God never led me down that path. He just picked me up and swooped me and took me to Corbin, and I am now just free from that.
Great. Related to what we've been talking about is, what has helped you the best in your road to healing?
People, God's people, other believers, getting outside of my own thinking or my own understanding or my own experience. Like, there's such a bigger picture than just what I've experienced, right? And there's such a deep magnitude of the type of sin that people experience, or, anything like that. So God really uses people to say something with truth, or understand me when I'm weak, or love me when I'm being sassy and I have an attitude, or when I'm in trauma. He's giving me the people that know how to professionally handle people who experience trauma. And I can now do that for women who don't have that, I guess it would just be the relation we have to each other, the love that we have for one another, the fearlessness, the boldness in people. He's used that more than anything, I really get to spend time with him in the Bible, But the Bible and the intensity of the Bible and the gospel comes alive in people to me. It's more intense than just reading the literature. Yeah, so I guess that's what I would say.
Good. What are some of the triggers that you may have, and how can we or other people respond to that, or how can we help that process? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I would say, I think I've mentioned some of my triggers, and it's mostly in, the toxicness of sin or the immaturity of a believer or someone who doesn't know Christ, right? Like, they ultimately have the greatest power to inflict pain on other people or lead them astray, right? So for me, I know that I want to have a well-rounded understanding of what Christ has done for me, not just around my trauma or just around softball. Like, I want to go deeper. And so having that thirst and having that desire to know God over and over and over, and to not be comfortable or not get settled when you've experienced a little bit of freedom or a little bit of hope, to keep thriving, to keep experiencing different people's stuff, like when I can go into a conversation and interact with someone who's experienced something so totally different from me, but I can have empathy over the pain that they've experienced because I know what pain feels like. That, having that type of sensitivity, I wouldn't call it sensitivity, I'd call it empathy. Just being able to get in somebody else's shoes and stand there with them and know that you either can identify or you can't, and being in that place with them. Reaching into somebody's mess and holding their hand. It's just, that is the greatest gift you can give someone that struggles in life,
How did you come to Christ? Was it through one single event? Was it something that God drew you, kind of pulled you along? Do you have that moment where you know that Christ came into your life, or was it a process for you? How did that happen?
I really identify with God being slow to anger, right? Or being patient, or being gentle. He's really kind of shown me that, because what I've experienced is aggressiveness and, deep pulls from people, pulling me into a situation or exposing me to something that's just very, very big, right? So God came into my life and he did the opposite. He was and then he'd hug me. I feel he would just kind of embrace me where I was at. And so it was a little bit of a process for me. He kept having to knock on my door. I was in a lot of fear. I was in a lot of doubt. I didn't have the ability to believe that God was, one, with me when that stuff happened, and two, still cared about me afterwards. That just wasn't something that I could wrap my head around and say, oh, the light's on, He really had to do some physical and spiritual work, and it came through people's blessings, people's prayers, the touch of God. There was a couple of spiritual experiences that I experienced that, like I've said before, is charismatic in nature. And that's just what I needed. And I'm okay with that today. I'm okay with knowing that there was a little bit more of a physical experience for me than just a subtle awakening of reading the Bible and believing that Jesus was real. He had to show me. And so that's how I came.
Good. How can the church today, do you think sometimes the church today has kind of its blinders on to people that are struggling and in a lot of pain? What do we need to be as a church to reach and to make a difference in people that are going through similar experiences?
So I would say, I know the Bible talks about blinders and, like God and stuff like that, but I think it's more of like stepping outside of self, right? Because we can sit in our stuff. We can like focus on what we are going through. And getting out of self for me is like going and telling somebody I appreciate them and then giving them an opportunity, if they're not in a place where they feel good about themselves, to share what they're going through with me. Or just noticing when someone's like not themselves. So it takes looking outside of yourself to be aware of that kind of stuff. And, setting it aside so that we can just minister love and minister compassion. And it's okay to cry with someone when they're going through something really hard. Like, just letting them know that, yeah, I validate what you're going through, and it's not easy, and I may not have the answer, but you're not going to be in it alone, So as a church, just kind of anything from like small groups gives people that opportunity to open up on a smaller scale. Some people are timid in big groups, or coming up for prayer, being able to identify with people's different personalities and how they express that personality, or their love language and how they express their love language. Like, I think just showing up for one another.
Okay. How about your family now? How is your relationship with your parents? And along with that, do they see the difference in you today in your relationship with Christ?
Yes. Yeah. They definitely see the difference. They don't fear me being around them. They don't fear what I do when I'm not around them anymore. My mom used to be on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds when I was really, really bad. And she's free from that. I had a hard time connecting with my dad because I associated him with what I did for so long that I didn't know how to even communicate with him and say, this is what I'm doing, because it was so polar opposite of what he was doing. And I was super scared to be rejected by my dad or be judged by my dad. And, it took a lot for me to I had to like see him as another addict rather than a father sometimes. Because there was this wedge, right? Addiction brings this wedge into people. So it's not that my dad's not my dad. My dad is definitely my dad. He's a very good dad. What's cool is he's gotten to see what he worked so hard to put into me, right? Because he was my coach for so many years. And like all of his kids kind of dropped the ball in pursuing our talents and letting those things come full force. So for him to experience all that work he did when he had the ability, is a huge gift I've been able to give to my dad. Like saying, Dad, this is because of you. You did all this for me. I would have never been good at sports or been successful. And I'm sure he carries a lot of guilt and shame around just, as a parent, like watching your kids go a different direction after you've put all this time and invested all this energy into a different route for them, And my mom, she actually told me when I was like first coming to Christ, I was super on fire. I was around them because I was going to school there. I've been pulled from my family because they're in California. But my mom told me for the first time ever, she's like, I've been seeking and praying for an understanding of God for 40 years. And I have never, like, it's just been nothing, she felt like she never had that understanding. She's like, for the first time in 40 years, I feel like I know God. I feel like I know his power because I've seen you transform and I see God in you. So that's a huge thing for my mom, to just know that God is real. She may not know it on a personal, intimate level, and experience it daily like some of us do because we seek and pursue him, till he has to do stuff for us. Yeah, so that's probably the coolest part.
What we're going to do is we're going to close our service again like last week, and that is to give an opportunity for us. What about you? Where are you at? I mean, not all the time does our life have to be an extreme, or does it have to be even, hidden. or maybe it is, and nobody else knows. But I want to leave time and opportunity. I know Allie does, and I believe that God has given you a wonderful gift of prayer to be able to pray for others and see people's lives changed. And we're going to come, our worship team is going to come, and we're going to sing together. And if you want to come forward, if you want to just meet for a time of prayer, Allie will pray with you. I will pray with you. Diane will pray with you. She's kind of and Dwayne, they're our prayer warriors of our church. And we're just going to end our service. You might slip up here and just for a moment and slip out. You're completely free to do where the Lord is leading you.